Welcome to Workin It Out with Dr. V. Today's guest will be Todd Corley, CEO of TAPO Institute, with co-host Norman Bailey. Got problems on the job, we're working it out. With Dr. Workplace got you stressing, we're working it out. With Dr. Yeah, we're working it out, working it out, working it out.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, known as Dr. V, your host of Workin It Out. We're the place and the program that helps you triumph over workplace stress. And I have with me my esteemed co-host Norman Bailey.
Hey, good to see you again.
And Norman is a coach to thousands of individuals, and he works with them to address work-life issues, stress, career, just
whatever comes on the plate.
Whatever comes on the plate.
You got it.
So, and I've been knowing Norman for several years.
It's been great.
So, as I indicated, our show is really about helping you, our listeners, triumph over workplace stress. And we really try to do it in a very up-close and personal way. And also to have those topics that are really relevant and relatable to your lives in the workplace. And so today we're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to me.
Oh, yeah?
Which is millennials.
I hear you.
And the title of our topic, well, this is a part 2 series. Part 1 is my millennials are stressing me out. So as a baby boomer, I'm trying to figure out how do I have these effective, robust, productive relationships with millennials who have a different kind of personality,
Very
right?
much so.
And a different set of needs. And in fact, I'm excited when I work with them and also challenged with that. So we wanted to spend some time just really exploring this. We're going to do it in a 2-part series. Our part 1 today is from our perspective, but for the perspective, say, of someone who maybe is in a different generation and trying to connect with millennials, just how do we really optimize on those relationships? And then part 2, our session for next week, we're going to have 2 millennials come in, and they're going to share why we're stressing them out.
Right, we get it from the source.
We get it from the source directly. And what are those things that we can do to really be much more supportive and empowering of them in the workplace? And this is really an important topic because in a couple of years, the millennials will be the largest part of our workforce. 60% of our workforce will be comprised of people that are below 30 years of age.
That's incredible.
And that is incredible. And it is already changing the mosaic of the workplace in terms of the rights and rules and policies, practices, and procedures. Right. So for those companies that are just thinking about it, they're already behind the 8 ball.
Absolutely. When you think about social media and the impact of all that in the workplace now, how they use their electronic tools.
It's fascinating.
It is.
It's absolutely fascinating. I think that is really one of the treasures and gifts that the millennials are bringing to us in our organizations, in our companies. And so today we're going to really just try to get a sense of who is this millennial person? What do we know about the millennials? What is it that they are looking for? What are the stressors that really are impacting them? Because interestingly, Norm, the data said that the millennials are the most stressed out generation in the workplace. And now we have 4 generations in the workplace: the traditionalist, and those are people that are usually over 65, 70 years of age. Right. And then we have the baby boomers who are like kind of almost there.
Talk to me, right?
And then we me too.
Hello.
And then we have the millennials, then the Gen Xers and Gen Ys who are like 40-ish, and then the millennials. And even Todd Corley, who's going to be our guest today, he has another Gen I group. Okay. And those are the ones who are who are even younger than the millennials who are coming. And so we really are in a place where we have a dynamic workforce where we have these different generations of individuals, and we come to these organizations with different needs and different aspirations.
Absolutely.
So we really want to take some time in the next 2-part series to really understand this millennial
this is a big one.
population and really to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that we are not doing to them what others might have done to us when we were different.
So important. Yes, indeed.
So I'm really excited about it. And we have with us Todd Corley, who is the CEO of TAPO Institute.
Hello.
And this is a gifted young man.
Yes, he is.
Just an extraordinary individual. And he has been involved in diversity and inclusion work for most of his young life.
Yes, he did. And in some incredible organizations.
and incredible organizations from Abercrombie and Fitch. And he's going to talk a little bit about that, to Starwood's Hotel. He worked with Towers Perrin, which was a big HR consulting firm. So he brings with him a lot of perspective.
Yes.
So I want to say hello, Todd.
Hi, Dr. V. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for really giving some time with us today.
You're welcome. Hello, Norman.
Hey, Todd. Good to have you on board with us.
Thank you.
Well, Todd, I'm so glad you're here because I tell you, I had a situation in my firm. I have a consulting firm, Alignment Strategies. And last year, we lost 2 of our millennials. Now, one was an intern from school, so we expected for her to go back. But the other was with us full time, and we lost both of those. And Todd, it pained me beyond what I could even describe for you because the perspective that they brought to the business was phenomenal.
Yes.
Their utilization of technology and what they were able to teach me just broadened my scope as an executive in the firm. And so when they transitioned, and I'm still close to both of them, when they transitioned out of the company and went back to school and doing some other things, I was just really, really hurt. And I struggled with what could I have done differently, or what should I have been more sensitive about in really connecting even more with this talent, because I absolutely adored them and I absolutely respected them. So talk to us, Todd, a little bit about who is this millennial, and any perspective that you could give me around, the fact that I lost 2.
Help out, Doc.
Help out. I'm almost in tears every time I think about it, but would be greatly appreciated. So who is this millennial? Is this term millennial a new term that's been coined, or, was I a millennial when I was under 30? Was I considered a millennial, or is this just a new way of thinking about a new group of people?
It's a new way of thinking about a new group of people. A gentleman by the name of Neil Howe and William Strauss, who written some phenomenal books and some research around generational issues, most notably the book Millennial Rising. They're credited with coining the phrase millennial generation. And they coined that phrase with this insight about who this generation would be, that grew up, and that was coming of age during a new millennium, the year 2000. So they were born in 1981, 82. Those are typically the markers that people use and look at for this generation. What I would say is, in your question about losing them, the one thing that stands out from your conversation that you don't often hear from others is that there is, a regret. And I think that's probably where we have to begin, which is we need to really be mindful of, this is a generation that brings a lot of innovation, creativity, unique perspective about, how to do things and how to do things differently. Managing them, what I say in between projects, is where most people lose their engagement for that generation, meaning when they're working on an assignment and they're moving to the next project, it's that in-between stage of, I want to do something else, and it may not be work-related necessarily, it may be something more purpose-driven that the company can do or to attach them to, if that's, some outward event, if that's some, campaign in the community that engages them as an individual. Because what this generation really looks for more than anything else is purpose-driven work, but they also want to be at the table. So they want to be, while they're working for an employer, involved in decisions that are being made about the company's direction, around the strategy. They're not really looking for permission. They're just looking to be invited, and openly so that they sense that they are part of the big community of wherever the employer is. So one thing that people have to be really mindful of is, are you setting up your organization in a way that receives them, as opposed to what I often tell clients, do you have a kiddie table? Are you putting them at the table where all the young folks are, as opposed to putting them at the table where the decisions are being made? Because that's where they want to be. I mean, they want to really stretch their cognitive muscle and be involved in, helping organizations grow and prosper, as opposed to just being told, what they should expect to see and hear.
Well, Pat, something you said there that really struck me, and that they're not looking for permission, but to be invited. Now, I could draw the conclusion from that means they perceive that they ought to be there, just waiting for you to just go ahead and open the door. So how does that balance out? Because I think, for us, other folk around, beyond that we've always understood, you got to be in place, and there's a role that comes with connecting you to being at the table. But it sounds like what I hear you saying, and I just want to make sure we're clear, that these folks are coming in the door going, hey, I belong. What are you waiting on?
They do. And I think what's interesting about them feeling a sense of belonging is because if you think about this generation, there's a convergence of historical events, But more than that, this convergence of technology and changes where they've grown up already connected. So if they've grown up connected on Facebook or Twitter and all these social platforms, their mindset walking into an employer is that I'm already connected to somebody. I'm already a part of a community. So by definition, I should be invited much like I am on my social platforms as I am in work. So for them, they don't see that difference in how they are treated, handled, nurtured, invited as they do with their social outlets. Again, the Twitters and the Facebooks of the world, because that's what they're used to. They're used to that community. And, sometimes a community that is borderless, meaning they may be connected with friends from, I don't know,
India,
London, or other parts of the world, Dubai, and they might not have ever seen them before, but they're in their social circle. So that is their expectation when they come to work, that community is open to them as they enter.
Well, it's interesting because as we've worked with companies, Norm and I have consulted with companies, and we talk with baby boomers and maybe some traditionalists. One thing that they say that irritates them is the assumption that they are a member versus earning the right to be included or to become a member, right? So it was interesting, Todd, that you indicated that they come into an organization assuming that they're members because they're members of so many other social networks, and they didn't have to jump through all these hoops to be a member. But then they come into these organizations and people are saying, oh, wait a minute, we hired you, true enough. You're part of our organization, true enough, but not necessarily a member. So it's a set of mixed expectations here and different rituals. Well, Todd, I just wanted to continue this, but I wanted you to share with us a little bit about your TAPO Institute. And the reason I'm asking you this is because I know that you have a particular focus on the millennial population, and that's unusual for diversity and inclusion firms to really have that kind of targeted focus.
It was interesting how I arrived there. I mean, for me, having the benefit of working in an organization that actually had 5 generations at work, from traditionalists down to, the Gen Zs, which, we're not necessarily going to talk a lot about today. But, those generational, tensions and those moments with all those generations in the workplace really inspired me to create an organization that said the generational influence of how people lead, how people are showing up at work, how people are managing relationships, all those things for me, I said when I look at my body of work in the diversity and inclusion space was so largely inspired by a generational shift in values and beliefs. So although I do a lot of work on D&I and some of the things that other traditional diversity consulting firms do, training sessions and executive coaching, my emphasis has really been, given to me by the folks that I've been most influenced by over the last 10 or 12 years. So I've made it my mission to do this work knowing that the shift in values is really not going anywhere. It's not going away.
It sounds like
it's not going to get any different in terms of we're going to go back to the way things used to be. We're here to stay.
Right.
So I think it's important for my consultancy to be mindful of that generational shift in values.
Well, we're so glad that you've made that commitment to have that focus. And when we return after the station break, and we really want to talk a little bit more about the stress with the millennials, because I'm concerned about them being the most stressed out generation. And what does that mean in terms of how they show up or not in the workplace? So we'll come back, Todd, and want to talk to you about that, Norman and myself. And we'll come back after the station break. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Workin It Out on HUR Voices, Sirius XM, Channel 141, along with Norm Bailey and our guest, Todd Corley. We'll be right back after station break.
Share your questions for Dr. V and Norman B. by emailing us at drv@workinitoutradio.com or normanb@workinitoutradio.com.
Well, welcome back from that station break. I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, Dr. V, your host of Workin It Out on HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141, along with Norman Bailey.
Hey, we're holding it down.
And we're holding it down, and our guest, Todd Corley. And we've been talking about a very interesting topic, and that's millennials.
Yes.
Those individuals, Todd, I think you said were born after 1981.
That's correct.
And are giving a lot of folks in my generation a lot of consternation, and probably generated by us.
Especially with this We Belong thing, right?
Yeah, We Belong thing, right? We felt like we had to sweat bullets to get to be a member. And so we were really as you know, the show is focused on really supporting our listeners and really triumphing over workplace stress. And I had shared earlier that a lot of the data has indicated that the millennials are the most stressed out generation. And I wanted to know, is that your take in terms of the work that you're doing? And what are those factors that are creating that stress for them?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a generation that is, a lot more stressed than others. I've read a lot of reports, report stress in America, and the facts are really clear about, who this generation is and why they're stressed. I think from my experience, a lot of it has to do with, an uncertainty about, what the economy looks like, where it's going, and some of it is also with, a lot of burden of debt, from college education. But the other things about it that I think are could go on unnoticed are, they're filtering through a lot of information. Some of it, on their own doing with regard to, how they post information on their Facebook pages and Twitter. But, there's an enormous amount of information that's available that they have to sift through. So I think this generation, because they are so technologically savvy, that's part of their stress and managing through all of those, mixed messages and messages that they're trying to understand.
It's quite interesting because with the advent of technology, Twitter and iPhone,
Instagram,
everything, it's hard to get away from work. I mean, we hear a lot of concerns and a lot of people are stressed out about that. So you're saying millennials even have an additional stressor on that because this is how they live and function, right?
I am saying that, yeah. I mean, that's their reality. And, there's no going away from that. I mean, you think about some of the images of young kids growing up and when they are playing with, iPhones and iPads. Those weren't toys that I had growing up. I mean, mine were Legos. Mm-hmm. So, it's a different way of being communicated with, and that process takes on its own, life of its own.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, not yesterday, but last week in our session last week, we were talking about this whole notion of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And some of the data that we found in that discussion was that 70% of the millennials said that they would leave their companies if they could get better work-life balance. And they appear to have an expectation, which I think is a healthy one, that they work in environments that are healthy, that they have jobs that allow for them to have a life outside of work, that they're able to balance the multitude of experiences and things that they want to do. And they were looking for those employers that are really going to be responsive to that. So if you think about this, 7 out of 10 millennials that work in your organization could conceivably say, I'm out of here if this work-life balance issue isn't solved. Is that an experience that you've seen and heard about?
It is. In fact, I have a current client, on Wall Street, and there's a young African-American managing director, which is, quite remarkable for his age in his early 30s.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And as he talked about his experience, he has left places because they haven't felt right to him. Mm-hmm. And he has become engaged in places like his current employer because of the mentorship, because of the relationships that he's been building with people who are around him, but also people who are, higher up in the organizational chain. So from him, and this is, probably a Fortune 100 company, his mindset is just exactly what you mentioned. If I can't find it somewhere, I'm going to find it somewhere else, and I can port my experience and my expertise.
It's interesting because and the data also suggests or indicates that for millennials, they'll have at least 7 or 8 different jobs before they're 40.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And is that based on just if it's not working the way I want it to work where I am, I'm going to get up and leave? Or is there something more aspirational about the number of job changes that they're making?
No, I think it's the latter. I mean, I think it's the aspirational side. And I say that because, in my research and doing a lot of reading around this subject, something that I didn't even think about, it made me think differently after I read the article. Here's a generation who has created their own pathway for different things and different opportunities. So if you think about Uber, you think about Airbnb, here are companies who basically say, we're going to do business differently. We're going to, force the hand of how we either travel or how we even, rent a hotel room. And that sense of a sharing economy, which is basically growing out of those 2 brands and other brands like it, basically says if we can't find it where we are, we're going to create it on our own. We're going to be entrepreneur. We're going to do things that are much different than you think are the norm. So this is a generation that will say, if I can't find it, I might not necessarily leave and go somewhere else, but I'll just build my own thing because I want options.
Absolutely. And matter of fact, I saw an article maybe about a year or two back of a company that was experimenting. I mean, we talked about, at some juncture, we have flattened out the organization in terms of hierarchy, but this organization was looking at how to just remove it. In other words, why does Sally need to go ask Joe if she can talk to the people in the other department? This was a fulfillment house, and because they thought this would be more efficient. But I would imagine from what you're saying that potentially could be driven by, the employee base that's now in the workplace. And the other thing I think that striking me as I listen to when you talk about that in-between stage and being with organizations with purpose, that they're not only evaluating, again, the work environment, but they're actually evaluating the people in the environment in terms of what they're about.
Right.
And if they're not finding that kind of synergy around, be it social responsibleness or what have you, then again, there's a disconnect because there seem to be more beyond just about the money. Is that a fair read in terms of what you're saying? It
is a fair read. And you actually bring up a really good point, too, in that I'm optimistic about this generation and what they're expecting because they're changing the landscape of what they want to see from people. In that last example of Uber and Airbnb, and as you just talked about, more purpose-driven, work. Yeah, there is the discussion with those two brands, for example, that there's an assumption that you're going to have familiarity, comfort, and trust with somebody because you're basically talking about strangers supporting strangers. I mean, I don't know who I'm getting in the car with in an Uber situation,
right.
Nor do I know, the landlord of an apartment on Airbnb's website because I just kind of found you. You're not a brand like a Marriott or a Starwood. So this generation is trying to push the envelope and make us more connected, I think, and have a sense of, how do we work together and build community.
Right.
And I think the other exciting aspect of millennials that I just love is the point that you made, Todd, is that they're really wanting to put the heart back into where they work.
Yes.
And who they connect with. That's really important. And I know when I started my corporate career, people will always tell you it's not personal. Don't take it personal. It's not personal. Well, for the millennials, it not only is it personal, but they're going to let you know it's personal.
Yes. So, real personal.
And I think that's really very, very healthy. So let me get back to the stress piece with the millennials because I'm trying to think about what are the ways that we can support them through our show in dealing with some of their workplace stressors. And one of the factors for high stress for millennials is this economic or money kind of issues. And what the data suggested is that 41% of these millennials that have this, what they call high money stress, student loans or living in a city like New York where the rent is so high and they can't go back and maybe live with their parents and save some of their money. But 41% of them, when they get stressed out, they have poor eating habits because we always think of the millennials as being really very healthy and very health conscious and all that.
All the good stuff.
And not that isn't true for a segment of them, but they're saying at the point that they get stressed and they revert back, even in much more intense ways than baby boomers and traditionalists around eating, around poor eating habits, around consuming more alcohol than when they're stressed out than even the other generations, even smoking more. Now, I don't know what they're talking about in terms of what's being smoked here, but they were saying that. But they were saying that 21%. They were saying that 21% of these millennials, when they're feeling high stress around the money issue, tend to even smoke more. And so, I'm concerned about what are some of the ways, from your experience, Todd, that millennials could think about not only identifying when they're approaching these really high stress points, but also what are some things they need to do or think about doing to cope with that stress?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm beginning to hear is that they're trying to reach out to their communities, more, meaning the ones that they're connected to on Facebook, for example, or even LinkedIn. They're trying to rely and ask of their colleagues, how are you dealing with it? Because I'm having a hard time. Because I think you're actually right, and you're dead on in terms of we should all be concerned about how they're going to react to this as it perhaps gets worse in terms of the debt burden and the competitive landscape of jobs and employment opportunities. So I think what I would encourage them to do, and I know you're going to have guests next week, they're probably going to reach out more to their circle of friends and try to work it out among themselves, because I think what's interesting and really exciting about this generation is that they know how to work together and solve issues. And this is going to be a big one for them because, this work well. Those things can lead to, unhealthy choices and can lead to, diabetes and high blood pressure. All those things can come as a result with that stress.
Exactly.
Stress is being engaged.
Exactly, and it can become a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
You know, it can become the way that they cope, the coping mechanisms that they establish. And I definitely, you know, given that they're going to be the majority population in the workforce in the next 2 years, I think it's really important for us to figure out and look at ways that organizations and individuals can be a support to them. I think it's great that they're reaching out because in our generation, people typically suffered in silence. They didn't really go to get coaches or counselors. So the fact that they're being transparent, I think, is a good thing.
Yes, they're not seeing any shame in that they have an issue to share.
Exactly. So I think that is awesome. But I just wonder, how can we become even more sensitive about what we can do? Okay. So I can't believe, again, we're at our almost at our 30-minute, but the time just goes so quickly when we have a guest like you, Todd, who's just so informed and just so relatable on a topic. You just make it, you just make the time fly by. And so we thank you so much for being a part of our show. One of the things that we typically do, Todd, before we end, is to ask Norman to give us one summary highlight in terms of what was a component that he...
All right, well, real quick, the big one for me, which we've experienced, is that, hey, I belong coming in the door. And I think this if we can grab and understand that's what's happening, I think that's a big takeaway for everybody.
And know that that's a really special feeling to assume that you belong. Well, Todd Corley, I just want to encourage people to go to your website, that's TAPO Institute, and connect with you around this millennial topic. And thank you so much for being part of our conversation today. And we would love to have you back to share more with us about the millennials. Will you come back, Todd?
I will. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
I look forward to that.
Well, I'm Dr. Vanessa Weaver, your host of Workin It Out on Sirius XM Channel 141. I forgot HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. And we'd like to thank you for spending the time with us, and we wish you a safe, productive, and happy week. Goodbye.
Email your work-related questions to www.workinitout.com.